did we piss off the USA so that like in the Olympics they're gonna get like LeBron, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, all these guys back in just to like show them who they really are?
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the BTR podcast. We are joined by a very special guest, our first ever guest analyst on the podcast. It's a bonus episode for you guys. We'll be discussing the FIBA World Cup, a little bit of NBA, Canada basketball mainly. Before we introduce them, just a heads up to everyone, a little recap. Canada basketball officially won bronze, and they have qualified for the Olympics. We're the best team in North America. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest. He covers the Canadian basketball team. He was at Jakarta for the FIBA World Cup. He's the host of the Weekend Ball podcast, which you guys check out on the Raptors Republic YouTube channel, and Behind the Play podcast, where he interviews, Canadian media members and others. You could check that out on its own YouTube channel. And he's probably the biggest media celebrity right now for Canada. It's Alex Adams joining us today.
Thanks, guys. I don't know if you're pumping my tires. I don't know if I'm the biggest media celebrity covering Canada basketball, but thank you for the intro and thanks for having me on.
I appreciate you, Alex. Yeah, no, I got to hype you up a little bit. I've seen you around Twitter.
You're the biggest one we have.
But yeah, no, how are you feeling right now? Right, you're back in Ottawa. The jet lag's still there, but then obviously you had to still cover the games in the early morning.
It's been interesting. Obviously didn't help my jet lag that all the games have been at 4 a.m. Outside the Slovenia game when I came back. But no, it was a really cool time being around the team. Obviously I was there when they made the Olympics. Was outside of this USA game, probably the most memorable moment of the tournament for this team. It was really cool for me, and like I took a video of Barrett, dancing that went viral a bit, and saw some of the players getting a bit emotional, like Dwight Powell, after that game. So just covering the team for about a month and a half. I went to their training camp in Toronto as well, which was really fun. So yeah, just overall it's been an amazing month and a bit for me, and a bit life-changing, and I appreciate you guys having me on, and excited to talk a bit about this team. And they, as you guys said, best team in North America, which is pretty cool to say. And I don't know if I would have expected to say this prior to the tournament, but they definitely were, and they were the better team in that game earlier today. And what a performance! And Dylan Brooks is gonna be an icon in this country for a long time, so that's pretty cool.
How was Jakarta? Like the city, the vibe, food, everything?
Yeah, no, the food was really good. The vibe, it's definitely different from Canada. I'll say that. Had a interesting experience on my first cab to the hotel. The guy was like, it was the middle of the night and he's swerving back and forth. He looked half awake. I had to like try to wake him up. So that was my welcome to Indonesia moment. But it was a really cool, really cool time. And the food was cool. It's a huge city. Like there's just people sprawling everywhere. Everyone that has Vespas or like little motorcycles. Like I swear there's more motorcycles than cars in Jakarta. So overall it was really fun, and just being around the players, and it was pretty cool. Made a lot of Latvian journalist friends, some French journalist friends, even a big guy in the soccer world who's Brazilian, who was there covering Brazil for ESPN. So just met a lot of cool people, and then became like very close with Arash Madani, which was honestly a privilege. And he's a really good guy. He's a pretty funny guy too. So went out for meals with him and everything. So he's a beauty, and check out his stuff. And he's a pro's pro in this industry, and just to see him ply his trade every day in and day out is pretty cool to see. And for me, it made me feel I'm very far away from that kind of level, but at the same time, just pretty cool to kind of shoot the shit. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this.
You're good. No, you're good.
Fine,
yeah. To shoot the shit with him, and he has stories for days that I won't share on this podcast, but he's definitely fun to be around. And his camera guy too, Mario, who was a fun time as well, who does a lot of the Leafs games. So that was just really fun, and definitely learned a lot about the industry and everything else from him and from them both.
So if I'm not mistaken, this was your first time live covering Canada basketball?
Yeah, no. So I have a kind of cool story. I don't know if you guys know who this guy is, but there's a guy named Scott Witter who's really big in the Canadian basketball Twitter scene, I guess. And I love this program. I remember watching it in 2015 in high school when they lost to Venezuela. That if you're a Canadian basketball fan, you remember that, where they were right there to make the Olympics and folded. And followed this team throughout their qualification and everything. And basically, when the roster was announced, like the original one in early July, he told me, he tweeted out just saying, "Oh, it's pretty cheap to get to Jakarta." I said, "Wow, that's cool. Like, I wish I went because I love the team." He said, "You should just apply to media," because he knew about my Behind the Play podcast that I started. I applied to FIBA independently. And then a week and a half later, I got credentials. So this is like late July. And then when I found that out, I was like, okay, I guess I'm getting a travel agent and book my hotels and everything. And then I went to training camp I think it started the first day of August, which was pretty cool to be in the Raptors kind of practice gym and seeing all the players for the first time. I definitely felt pretty in awe. And and then obviously was there for a couple of days and then went to Jakarta. So that's kind of that's the Spark Notes kind of version of the story of how I covered this team.
In terms of media, was it just you and Arash?
Yep. Oh, yeah. Okay. If Scott was there too, but he would always say he was from X.com because he just applied as Twitter journalist.
Oh.
So he literally asked Shay a question. I forget what the question was, but he said, Scott Witter, X.com, and you just saw Shay smirk a little bit and laugh. So and he left halfway through. So really it was just Arash and I, yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the program as a whole, because we're kind of new in terms of the program. We noticed a lot of similarities with Canada soccer, which we're kind of more familiar with. But your overall thoughts as Canada basketball, how are they improving? Do they any improvements they need to make on your end? Any suggestions you have? I know you mentioned promoting. Like I saw you pretty heavy on Twitter or X about there should be more media members, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big Canada soccer fan as well. I was there when they qualified for the World Cup and when they beat Jamaica. I would not equate the two organizations as similar. One, they're not beefing with their players. They have a relationship. I just want to put that clear, is that it's almost like the on the field stuff or on the court stuff has been very similar.
Yeah, that's what I meant to
say. But the off the court stuff's very different, right? Like I developed quite a good relationship with Mike Bartlett, cares about the players, gave them first class everything. Like they chartered them when they were doing their friendlies and everything. Unlike Canada soccer that has Jonathan David in economy. So it's very different organizations. But what was your original question? Sorry.
Like your thoughts as a whole, any improvements they could make, like maybe suggestions you might have that you would like to see, specifically I guess promoting Canada basketball.
Yeah, I think it's more from maybe other outlets. So as you mentioned, just it only being Arash and I, right, being down there in Jakarta. Arash was the only Canadian journalist at the games in Manila, and I believe Slovenia had 11 journalists. So and maybe Slovenia is like 3-4 million people. Maybe I'm a bit off, but they're not that big of a country, right? And they are sending all these media members. Now that's more of an indictment of where the media landscape is in Canada, as you guys would know as well. Yeah. There's not a lot of jobs. There's not a lot of opportunities. There's not a lot of organizations really kind of investing in sports and in specifically in Canada basketball. So I think that's more of an indictment on where the industry is in this country rather than necessarily anything else. And in terms of Canada basketball, the organization, they're first class. I mean, sure, maybe there's little things that I don't really know or don't have the purview. Like I'm not behind the scenes with the players, but the fact that they got them insured, which people don't know, is to insure NBA contracts is a lot of money. And Canada basketball and Mike Bartlett really, like, I'm sure they were in significant debt if they weren't to make this Olympics. And now that they have. I know, talking to him personally, that he has kind of things lined up to maybe make that money back. So I think Canada basketball should be now in a good place financially. I think on the court, obviously, you see they made the Olympics, and they haven't in a long time. And give credit to Rowan Barrett for doing the 3-year commitment that clearly worked. And they had continuity, and they kept talking about being there in Jakarta, about the players that, like, I know one another. We've been together for a long time. We have these relationships. It's not like the USA where they just put 3 Villanova players and then the rest of the team together. And so it's a bit different between those kind of programs, but they got to the Olympics, they got a medal. I think it was a pretty fantastic tournament for Canada, and really feels like a stepping stone for the program and for men's basketball in this country going forward.
Have you like watched the Redeem Team?
Yeah, I have.
Would
Yeah.
you
Like
say
the
it's like
documentary?
similar? Yeah, would you say it's like similar to that, like with a 3-year commitment and like how they?
Yeah, different. A little bit, because Jamal Murray wasn't there and other people weren't there. So I think there was actually a bit more commitment from the Redeem Team. But yeah, it's the similar kind of ethos or idea in terms of with the Redeem Team. For people that don't know, the US lost to Argentina in 2004 in the Olympics. They actually lost to Puerto Rico by like 20 earlier that tournament, that people don't really know about, which is kind of funny because they're technically the same country. So they got Kobe Bryant, I almost said Shaq, LeBron, and kind of Dwayne Wade and all those guys to commit to playing in their world championships. And then in 2008, and they beat this marvelous Spain team with Gasols and Rubio and Rudy Fernandez, who's still kicking it for Spain, and all those guys. So you can see that here, where Shea and Nikhil and Dwight Powell and Kelly Olynyk all played last summer for Canada. And then they came back this year, although Dylan Brooks wasn't there and Lou Dort and RJ Barrett weren't, but they had played in 2021. So there was more continuity than ever before, really, with this group. And I think you could see that on the court. There's going to be very interesting decisions going forward in 2024. Do you let an Andrew Wiggins join? I think Jamal Murray, if he wants to be there, was part of the commitment, even though he never played. He did go to camp. So I'd imagine Jamal Murray's there unless injury, or maybe even the Nuggets go deep in the playoffs again, which is possible.
Okay, let's move on to the actual on-court play. They did not make this look easy, first of all, because like you beat France, you're like, oh, it's kind of like you're on good roads, and then Brazil happens. But let's moving to the group stage. What are your overall reaction? So including the whole thing, did they surprise you? Did they meet your expectations? Like, did you expect them to make the Olympics, or were you like, this exceeded my expectations a little bit?
Yeah, no, I said if they made the quarterfinals, they'd make the Olympics, and they made the quarterfinals, as you said, by the skin of their teeth in that crazy Spain game. So I thought they had a pretty good chance, but because of the draw they had, obviously playing France to start the tournament, if they were to have lost that game, it would have been really tough for them to make it to the quarterfinals. And then obviously Spain, Latvia, even without Porzingis, obviously we saw how they did. They came 5th in the tournament. Very good side. So overall, just a crazy, nerve-wracking couple games. That loss to Brazil just should never happen. Felt like the old scars of Canada basketball, losing to some team they should never lose to. Although shout out to Bruno Caboclo, because he was really good to me. Overall, just they really like it, like it's tough in FIBA, especially when you haven't played together consistently, and you could tell that through the games, for the most part, they grew as a team. And that's really, like, I think kind of the exclamation point of that is the way they beat the USA. And even though it wasn't maybe like the easiest win, obviously, in overtime, but just the fact that they were able to beat the USA, they probably couldn't have played that well at the beginning of the tournament and beat a team of that caliber. And Jordi Fernandez talked about each game they wanted to get better. And I thought for the most part, they did, with a couple hiccups. And this group will have learned a lot going into the Olympics. And I'd imagine the core of the team will be the same. So just amazing tournament. It was very close. It was very touch and go of this team not being at the Olympics, and we have to think about an Olympic qualifier like every other year, and those don't seem to go very well for Canada. So they did it. That Spain game will just be something that all Canadian fans relish for so long. And then this USA game was the cherry on top. So an amazing tournament, and they played awesome, and look no further to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Dylan Brooks, who really led the way.
I think people don't realize like this third place game. Just fast forwarding a little bit here. I'm not a big fan of third place games, right? But in this case, I am, because they've never won a medal, right? The confidence boost. Now, like you mentioned, maybe other media outlets will look at this and be like, okay, we have something real. And then they look at the team they beat. It's the US. Granted, yeah, it may not be their star players, but it's still the USA basketball, right? So it was big, this game, to get this win and get like the whole country to notice. Even if they wake up, this morning and saw the game replay or highlights.
Yeah, no, I was talking to some people, and I thought, in a weird way, Canada beating the USA in a bronze medal was probably better for the whole program and the notoriety of this program than it would be if Canada had made the final and lost to a non-USA team. Just because beating the USA in Canada is always something special and always kind of mean to, like, it just gets more attention. I've got a lot of media requests already, and I think that's probably because they beat the USA and not because they beat Serbia. No offense to Serbia or Germany, right? It's just not the same. So, and it's just such a statement to kind of put this program on the map with kind of a thump, just with that win, and also the way they did it. And you look at just the way Dylan Brooks played, which is another story in and of itself. So, yeah, I mean, I disagree with third place games aren't kind of important, but in these kind of settings, like where it is like a World Cup or a World Championship, that the fact that they have a medal coming home to Canada, like I think about guys like Kelly Olynyk, Dwight Powell, Melvin Ejim, Phil Scrubb, shout out to Carlton, and he's a BC guy too, so I guess for you guys as well. Yeah. But just those kind of guys that plied their trade for so long, and they finally have some hardware that really they can, I think Dwight Powell said that's something that you can live with forever as a medal, and that's what they're going to have. And hopefully they'll get another medal and maybe a bit shinier and maybe a bit more bolder next year in Paris.
Okay, so going back to the games again, what was when you're watching it in Jakarta and then back home, what was the difference you've noticed in the Brazil and Serbia games compared to the rest of the games, especially Slovenia, Spain, and even today with the US? Like, what worked then and what didn't work with the Brazil games?
Yeah, well, Brazil, I think, was just super athletic, and Canada just had a really off shooting night. And I think they probably got a pretty complacent as well. Just in the fact that they had gone 3-0 in their group. Brazil was kind of the easy game, it seemed like, before the Spain game. And Brazil had an amazing game plan. They basically forced Canada to shoot and make perimeter shots. They had Bruno in the paint, which didn't help guys like SGA and RJ get to the rim. And then Canada, Nickeil Alexander-Walker hits the side of the backboard and airballs an open three. If he makes one or probably both of those shots, Canada probably wins the game. So kind of everything went wrong in that Brazil game, and Brazil was smart, forced Canada to score. Canada did not play very well and got complacent. Now with the Serbia game, I think that's more indicative of what the challenges will be like in the Olympics, and you could see how they almost lost to Spain. Very similar teams, really smart. They have size, they can shoot, they played together forever, and you really see that in the way Canada lost to Serbia and the struggles they had against Spain, is that they had that lack of size. You look at Dwight Powell, he's an undersized center against Militunov, who kicked his butt, and then also Willie Hernan-Gomez, who almost kicked his butt. And then at the same time, Canada just doesn't have that, at least this iteration of this team doesn't have a lot of outside shooting. And so their offense got a bit muddied in stretches. And as well, just the playmaking as well. Outside of SGA, they don't really have guys that can create for others. And then on defense, they just weren't big enough, right? And just it's hard going against teams that move and cut and run around you and can all shoot. It's just really hard to defend when the team has those types of continuity and assets, and you're a bit more ISO-y, a bit less size, meaning you might have to pick up more fouls like you saw in the Serbia game as well for Canada. So those are the kind of differences, and I think the challenges this team will face. I don't think they're going to be able to really address size too much. Maybe a Brandon Clark, maybe a Kem Birch come into the fold. But I think in regards of shooting, Jamal Murray would be very helpful. And a couple other, maybe Andrew Wiggins, maybe Andrew Nembhard, those guys would help. And then just in terms of playmaking, Jamal Murray, I think in the first 4 games of the NBA Finals had over 10 assists. So that shows you there's just another guy, one for SGA, that not all the defense is just all going to SGA, probably frees him up. Maybe he doesn't have to play 40 minutes. And then they'll just have another shooter and scorer and release valve that they didn't have on this team, because if you shut down SGA, other than maybe Dylan Brooks a couple times, you kind of shut down Canada. And if Jamal Murray's there, that might not be the case, or I don't think it will be the case.
Yeah, okay, so actually let's stick with that. I was gonna ask you about the flaws. You kind of touched based on them. I was messaging you this morning while the game was going on. I did mention that SGA Murray thing because, some people might say Jamal Murray not being there may have made it easier for Shea, but clearly Team USA, I disagreed with that. And Team USA, they have Steve Kerr, Eric Spoelstra, Ty Lue as your coaches. Like, they're no slouches, they're top level coaches. So they knew what they were doing, which is why Canada kind of choked late at that moment. That secondary ball handler in Jamal Murray is huge, like you mentioned. Is there any others outside of the two of them that you see could come in and fill that role? I know they had Trey Bell Haynes, but he didn't play much. And then I think Dan Shulman, I'm talking on Sportsnet 650 here about Pangos and Corey Joseph as well.
Yeah, so Kevin Pangos, for people that don't know, he played for Gonzaga for a while, I believe with Kelly Olynyk, if I'm not mistaken. But he's a really good FIBA player. He's kind of like a Steve Nash light, very good shooter, pretty good playmaker, but pretty undersized. He was originally going to be on this team, and he pulled out because of basically injury. Corey Joseph, I don't think was I don't want to say he was cut, but there was maybe mutual kind of, he probably wasn't going to get the playing time he wanted, didn't want to go all the way to Jakarta. So that's an option who would, if he put his hand up, I'd imagine would be on the roster next time, and is an upgrade over Trey Bell Haynes, as much as, he put in a really good shift, as you say, in soccer for Canada. And then I think Andrew Nembhard's the one that I think of the most. He's played, for people that don't know, he was actually in the 2019 World Cup as like an 18-19-year-old for Canada, and has that FIBA experience, played with RJ Barrett for Canada here in Ottawa in 2018 as teenagers. And he's a decent shooter, can play make at a pretty high level, and I think would just be a very much an overall upgrade on Trey Bell Haynes. So I think that those are the maybe 2 or 3 type of players that would be options for Canada, and most likely would be considerably better than Trey Bell Haynes. On top of, if you add Jamal Murray, you might not even really be playing those guys that much in the big games, just because you're kind of stacking those 2 guys up and staggering those 2 guys' minutes in SGA and Murray, so that they're always on the court at all times for Canada.
For one player who had a good rookie year, in my opinion, was Benedict Mathurin. So what do you think are his chances of making the team?
I don't like his chances, I would say. One, there's less roster spots in FIBA than in the NBA. If there's a 15-man roster, I think he'd be on it. Because it's only 12, you think, let's say, like, again, I always have to say this, presuming health, but let's say all of the Canadian players that were healthy and playing at this World Cup are next year. I imagine all 7 NBA players are there. You add in a Jamal Murray, you add in maybe a Pangos, or a point guard, Nembhard, Corey Joseph. You're at 9 players. Then you have probably another big, either Kyle Alexander, Zach Edey, I don't think will probably be on the team. Maybe Brandon Clark, maybe Kem Bircher at 10. And then maybe an Andrew Wiggins, then you're at 11. And so are you bringing a guy in that's going to, like, he's not really a passer. He's very much a scorer. I don't really see a role on this team right now with RJ Barrett. They're not exactly similar players, but do a similar kind of outcome on the court, as in just like ball dominant scorers. So I just don't really see a role for Ben Mathurin. Now, maybe he's on the team. I don't know. Maybe guys pull out, maybe injuries happen and it makes sense. But if everyone's healthy, I don't really see a role for him. And he's never played. He played actually at the U19 for FIBA in 2021 when they won. I believe he was on the All-Star team when they won a bronze medal. But I just don't see a role with him unless he makes a huge jump and players get hurt. That goes the same for Shaedon Sharpe. That I've seen a lot of people talk about Shaedon Sharpe. The guy has unlimited potential, but look at the USA. Like, a lot of these guys, like Brandon Ingram, did not play well, and he's a 2-time All-Star because he's not really suited for the FIBA game unless he's getting the ball all the time. And that's kind of what I see for Ben Mathurin. And then for Shaedon Sharpe, just not enough experience in just like the highest moments. I don't think coaches would trust him, and on such a talented roster, I just don't see a fit for him right now. In 2028, those two players are probably going to have prominent roles for this team.
Sticking with the little flaws, as you mentioned, the lack of, okay, so clearly a lot of the players you just mentioned were guards, maybe wing players. The depth and the bigs isn't that great, right?
Yeah.
Like Zach Edey came in today, did not do well. And you mentioned Brandon Clark. First off, with Brandon Clark, I know he was injured. Was he one of those guys that was on that 3-year commitment?
No, he wasn't.
Okay. But like a guy like him, for example, like I'm not saying if Canada gets an elite big, like I'm not Jokic and Embiid, we know this team would be out of the world, even Karl Anthony Towns, right? But you look at US, if they had a Bobby Portis type on Canada, like a stretch big that could make, I know I might be a little off with how Bobby Portis plays, but a rim protector that could maybe stretch the floor, I feel like personally this team would be a little bit more different as well. And I'm not sure if that Brandon Clark fits that role. I know he's a rim protector, but
yeah, he'd be a rim protector. I think if you're playing him at the 5 as a backup behind Powell, that's kind of where I'd see him, just like a better version of Kyle Alexander. Not that it's ideal, but it's just a bit more depth. And he is more of a rim protector than either Powell or Alexander is, but Alexander doesn't really have a lot of offensive game at all, really. So other than making threes at the end of blowout games, he did it twice actually. Just fun fact. But as a 7-footer, but yeah, the fact of the matter, that's how I'd see it. But you're right. There's not a lot of bigs in the system, and similar to the US for that matter. Canada hasn't really been producing bigs. So there's not much depth. You could maybe look at a Chris Boucher. I don't really think FIBA with a lot of strong guys is really the best thing for skinny Chris Boucher. I don't think he it would be the best fit on this roster, but that could maybe be someone that would maybe be interesting if he could shoot a bit better, maybe. But yeah, the bigs are definitely going to be the problem. And we talked about shooting, playmaking. I think the size is the only one that they can't really address significantly, unless they naturalize Pascal Siakam or something weird like that, which would be kind of fun. But I don't think it's going to happen.
The slow starts, I think that's what, they came back in the France game. They did that in the Spain game. But like the theme of this tournament was they do not like to make it easy, right? How much of that do they need to fix? And is it just simple, just get your mind right in the first, second to the last, and that's it?
Yeah, I don't, I asked them it seemed as though every single game I'd ask them those questions in Jakarta, and they had decent starts against Slovenia. Not a good start against Serbia, but a very good start today. By far their best start of the tournament against the USA. So I don't really know how to answer that other than maybe it's experience. Maybe some of it I think was just Shea would have slow starts. And, as I mentioned before, The team kind of went as Shea went, right? Being, in my opinion, the best player in the tournament, who played the best in this FIBA World Cup, and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. So when he started pretty confidently and aggressively, this team played well. If you look at the USA game, look at the Slovenia game, when he was a bit more timid or just not making shots like he did against Spain and France and Latvia, where he had cold starts. The team had cold starts. So I don't really have an answer, but other than the fact that if Shea was cold in the first quarter, that was pretty indicative, or first half, it was pretty indicative of Canada having a slow start. And that makes a lot of sense to me. So
flipping on a positive note here, the strengths. A lot of it, I'm assuming, it was that perimeter defense. You have Lou Dort, you have Dylan Brooks, who was, I believe, named defensive player of the tournament. And we'll get into Dylan Brooks in a second. But was that like the main strength that helped them propel their offense in transition and then help Shea as well throughout?
Yeah, I did find, though, against the USA, against the better teams, it was a bit harder for them to get in transition. But and their defense, you could tell, just waned a little bit more because of team size. But yeah, that was their strength, right? Like, you have two ball hawks in Dylan Brooks and Lou Dort at the perimeter. Even Shea gets a lot of steals. He kind of gambles, but he gets a lot of steals from those reach in behind the player with his long arms. Nickeil Alexander-Walker as well played really good defense. I can still see him hounding, I believe his name was Nunez, the 19-year-old point guard for Spain at the end of that game. He was just amazing. He's super long as well. So that's definitely was their best part of their defense, was just forcing turnovers, creating a lot of pressure on the ball, meaning that teams would have to take a bit longer in sets. But that against the better teams, it got exposed a little bit, and hopefully that's, I think, why you saw Jordi Fernandez go to the Lou Dort instead of Kelly Olynyk, was just because they needed everyone on the court to be a good defender, because Kelly Olynyk was pretty poor, honestly, as the tournament went on. And because of their lack of size and him being on the court a lot of the time, they just made their defense kind of falter quite significantly. But when they just went to all guards and Powell, their defense definitely stepped up, and their offense did as well, because they were forcing a bit more in transition. And RJ Barrett was the prime recipient of those kind of opportunities.
Outside of Shea, and now I guess Dylan Brooks too, who impressed you the most? Because I think the obvious answer was going to be Dylan Brooks, but
yeah, no, that and even before maybe the quarterfinals, or maybe this the Spain game, I would have said Dylan Brooks, and it would have made sense because it was underrated. Now he's probably almost overrated because of how well he's been playing. I would have said Nickeil Alexander-Walker, but he was very up and down. I thought RJ was pretty up and down. So I'd say probably Nickeil Alexander-Walker, just in a FIBA setting. Even though he didn't play great against the USA, he just was a pretty good six-man, created a lot for his teammates, a decent passer. I'm not sure what he finished with, but for the majority of the tournament, he was over 40% from three. And I think just in a FIBA setting, he's very good in terms of he can create his own shot. He can make for others. He shoots, which this team really needs to like kind of improve upon. So I really liked his game, and he played really well in 2021. So those are some of the things that like I really liked in him. And Lou Dort was great. Shot selection was not so great, but Lou Dort obviously was really good. I thought RJ was up and down. So I won't give it to him because everyone knows RJ Barrett because of the Knicks and everything else. So I'll say Nickeil.
Okay, I'm gonna get your thoughts on a couple players. Dylan Brooks is the first one to bring up. Now, before this tournament, we all know, I mean, as a Laker fan, we saw the Memphis series, right, against the Lakers. He made some comments, the poke the bear comments on LeBron, and ever since then, not even then, he has some dirty play. I'm not saying he's a dirty player, but he had like dirty play moments where his reputation took that hit. And then when the season ended, it was like, it came out reports, I think by Shams, I believe, oh yeah, like Memphis is no matter what, they're not going to take Dylan Brooks. Well, clearly he got a contract in Houston. Whether he'll live up to that or not, we'll find out. But people don't realize that his the offense is a bonus. Like he's there mainly for the defense, right? And how much of this is now an eye-opening for the rest of the world that like, hey, this guy, you might hate him. As a Canadian fan, I love him now, right? Like as a Canadian fan, I love him. And maybe he'll help those young guys in Houston along with Fred VanVleet build up that reputation and that defense and that grit.
Yeah, I mean, what a tournament he had. Like, I mean, out of all the players in this tournament, he had, as much as maybe Dennis Schroeder took a big step forward for Raptors fans, I still believe in the end, Dylan Brooks before this tournament was such a villain, was, you know, his stock, as Bill Simmons would say, would be plummeting down. And after this tournament, it just went the opposite direction. Like everyone wants to buy Dylan Brooks stock. So yeah, for the Rockets, for me personally, before this tournament, my worry was his shot selection. And sure, I don't know if he's going to always shoot. I think his true shooting percentage was 76%, which is just ridiculous. And he shot 58% from three. I don't think that's going to happen for the Rockets. But if he's closer to a high 30s, close to 40% shooter, bring that defense. His shot selection for the most part was pretty good. Now he made all these tough shots as well, which I didn't really know he had in his bag until this tournament. Overall, what he brought to Canada was amazing. He is on that line, right? He got kicked out of the Slovenia game. Thankfully, it didn't matter. He got a bunch of flagrants, almost got a second flagrant in that Spain game down the stretch, which probably would have been Canada's undoing. So he likes to live on that edge, similar to a Draymond Green and other people like that. But I mean, if you're a Houston Rockets fan, you just must be over the moon that you're getting a player like him who will just bring so much for the culture, and all his teammates being down there in Jakarta really liked him. You could tell how much, you know, he's a team player. Like it wasn't me, as much as he took a bunch of crazy shots and made them all. He's definitely a team first player. He plays with a lot of effort. Man, oh man, it'll be really interesting to see what he looks like in the NBA again, because a lot of what people hated was just him taking 14 shots and going 4 of 14. But if he's more like 7 of 14 consistently, that's one heck of a player. And even if he just shoots a bit less and stays efficient, Houston has got a really good one and probably got an amazing deal for only paying him $20 million a year.
He is definitely like a FIBA type player too, right? In my opinion, like the physicality and everything, like you mentioned.
Yeah, no, he really seemed to like it and enjoy it and get in people's faces and maybe get away with a lot. He did get a lot of fouls for grabbing and so it was very up and down. So he got a lot of fouls, but overall I'm sure the game definitely suited him more than the NBA. Just in terms of the physicality, and he was such a phenomenal player. And on the defensive end, as you guys mentioned, just he had a lot of defensive plays in this game, not just offensive, right? Like at the end, blocking Austin Reeves at the end of regulation. I can think of one where it was in transition. I think Mikal Bridges went down the lane when the game was tied late in the fourth, and he blocked him, and then he went out of bounds with the ball, but he basically stopped an easy layup or in transition for Mikal Bridges. So overall, fantastic player, and let's see how he does in the NBA.
For people who don't realize at home, Dylan Brooks at the beginning at the free throw line was getting booed, and in the USA game he was getting MVP chance. So that's how much of a rise he had in his stock.
Yeah, no, I remember in the first game against France he got booed, and then at the end he was getting an MVP chance within the same game. I've never seen that ever. Like watching basketball from afar, that is one of the 360 turnarounds I've never seen. But people seem to hate him because they knew him from the NBA and LeBron, and then they seem to love him by the time the game was over and they had seen him for 40 minutes. So that's just the way it went.
Another player, RJ Barrett, you mentioned it earlier. I think the one word I describe of him as like frustrating, right? Like even in this game, it's like, RJ, you hit that three, we're in it. The next possession, he hits a tough layup or whatever. In your opinion, is he the most frustrating player as well to watch?
On this team, yeah, I'd say so. Like he had those 1 of 9 shooting games, 1 of 10, I believe. Those were the 2 against Brazil and then against France, I believe. Off the top of my head. In this game today, he had these dumb turnovers and dumb shots in crucial moments, and then he made these huge, big like a lot of pressure clutch shots. So he was very up and down. I still think he forces a little bit too much. He obviously likes to go to his left a lot, but maybe just picking and choosing when to attack the defense, right? Like a couple times he just run into 3-4 guys around the rim. But then later in the game, he realizes, oh, Austin Reeves is on an island in transition. Let me just attack him and get a big layup. So I think the decision making is big for him. Obviously, if he could be a better shooter, that'd be great. But he was 4 of 8 today in the biggest game of the tournament for Canada. So he seems to definitely step up for his country. But man, he is very. It was more he played the way I thought Dillon Brooks would have played before this tournament, where you love what he does and then he just does a bunch of boneheaded things. Dillon Brooks just couldn't do no wrong, while RJ definitely did a little bit. But in a lot of ways, if RJ played really well, Canada played really well. I know I said that about SGA, but you could say the same about RJ. And today he had, I think, 23 and was 4 of 8. And if he doesn't make all those threes and all those shots at the rim, Canada probably doesn't win this game. So even with the bad turnovers and a couple bad shots.
Yeah, I know. Like, I'm rooting heavily for him as a Canadian fan, right? Because like he was touted as the number 1 guy before Zion and Ja had like their crazy college freshman years or college years, and then in the NBA, I think because his potential is there, I think that's what makes him really frustrating. It isn't like, whereas Dillon Brooks was a 2nd-round pick, and then he had all this drama before the tournament. Whereas with RJ, it's like he got the contract, he's on the Knicks, so it is worldwide. And as a Canadian basketball fan, and I know you as well, it's like, come on, RJ, we're rooting for you. Don't kind of make me look dumb here. Like, I'm trying to defend you here.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I mean, he has that pedigree. You can tell how much it means to him. Obviously, his dad went to the Olympics, and he was pretty emotional when he found out he was going to the Olympics. But I think he's never really been on a team that really suited him. And even this Canadian team, I'd really like to see him maybe in the Olympics in a 6-man role, or maybe there's a couple more shooters on the court where he's not going into the paint and there's a lot of help, even though in FIBA there's no defensive 3 seconds for the defense. At this, there's still, Canada did not have the type of shooting that might have really helped them kind of open up. Like, you think about Ben Simmons playing with Joel Embiid. It's not the exact same comparison, but that was not the ideal kind of way for Ben Simmons, who at the time was good, to play. Because he had someone clogging in the paint. And with RJ, he's had Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson. And for Canada, it's more just Dwight Powell a little bit and just like Lou Dort. He was just not a great shooter and otherwise. So let's see how he does next summer for Canada.
Before we move on to the coaching by Jordi Fernandez, how important is it as Canadian basketball fans and the media to recognize the players that did not make this team? Not saying not like Andrew Wiggins and them. I'm talking about the Tom Scrubs, for example. I think his name's Thomas Scrub.
It's Phil Scrub and Tommy Scrub, but Phil Scrub was on.
Yeah, no, sorry. I'm talking about the brother. So Tommy Scrub, who never made the team, but were big factors of helping this team get to this point, right? Because like I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the qualification is throughout the year. So it's not like Shea and all these guys weren't always there. So in your opinion as the media, how important is it for guys like us and other basketball fans in Canada to recognize those players as well?
Oh, just huge. Like, they got them there. Like, I believe the SGA and like the NBAers only played in 3 or 4 out of the 12 qualification games. I could be mistaken on the total, but of how many they had, but they only played in 3 or 4 because they'd have games in February in like Venezuela, and it's all these guys, taking 12 flights to get there. And as I know, doing Ottawa to Jakarta, taking all those flights across the world is, a big commitment and takes a lot out of you just to play a game where you're not getting paid, and it's just for the pride of your country, right? So you have to shout out Tommy Scrub, Connor Morgan, Kyle Wiltshire, Cassius Robertson, who wasn't on the team because of an injury, but those types of players that stood out, Cadre Gray, just a bunch of guys that came to all those games, and obviously the scrubs that when no one really they didn't need to, they sacrificed for their country, so they deserve a huge amount of credit, because Canada only lost one game, I believe, in the qualifiers, and that's because of those guys' commitment. So huge props to them, and hopefully I hope like a guy like Melvin Edgem, who's been on this program forever, is maybe that last player on the squad in Paris, just as maybe a symbol for those kind of guys that pushed through and really led the way, even when there wasn't NBA guys, and sacrificed so much for this program.
Okay, let's get into the coaching. Jordi Fernandez replaces Nick Nurse, relatively 6 weeks before the tournament started, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, 2 months. Yeah.
Yeah, your overall thoughts, were you surprised of how he got the troops together? And obviously there were ups and there were some downs, but your overall thoughts of Jordi Fernandez, who's kind of auditioning for a head coaching position as well in the NBA.
Yeah, I thought he did a great job. I would have loved if he called a bit more timeouts to stop runs. That would have been nice. But other than that, I thought he made the right adjustments in the right games for the most part. Obviously the Brazil game, he probably wants back. I don't think against Serbia he really could have done much. They all got in foul trouble. So there's so much you can do. But no, I thought he did a great job. The players clearly liked him. He clearly was forceful with the players. I don't know if people saw, but the videos of him during timeouts kind of chewing out his team. And then after the game, I remember I asked him after Brazil, about the team, and he said SGA needs to be better, Olynyk needs to be better, RJ needs to be better, in a press conference, right? So wasn't afraid to pull punches, and overall you have to give him a lot of credit, because this team played for the most part really well as a unit, considering their lack of continuity, and they made the Olympics, right? And no Canadian coach has done that for 24 years. And really I think he earns his plaudits for maybe the way they beat France, and beating Spain and the USA, just really tough games where he really pushed the right buttons. And I think about how he took out Kelly Olynyk to start the second half against Spain, which was the right move, to really put all that ball pressure on the Spanish guards, and that really led the way in terms of Canada coming back in that game. So deserves a lot of credit. Very, I did an interview with him. He's a very serious guy. Likes to quote Canadian artists all of a sudden, so that's always funny, with the Arkells. Yeah, I think the NBA's around the corner in terms of a head coaching job. We'll see what happens there. I hope that it doesn't affect him at least being the coach through to Paris. We'll see. But did an amazing job, and hopefully he can stick along in Paris and get Canada a medal.
So what was the difference? Because you've obviously watched more Canada basketball than we have. Nick Nurse came aboard in 2019. Was there any key difference you've seen between the two?
Yeah, I'd say Jordi Fernandez is a bit more conservative in his plays, right? He's not throwing out box and ones and weird junky defenses. But so I'd say just more conservative for the most part. But he still used different plays. People should check out my colleague Jonathan Chen, who had a really detailed piece about maybe the differences and the similarities between Nick Nurse and Jordi Fernandez at Raptors Republic. So but for the most part, I'd say just more conservative, and I'd say probably more, from everything I've heard, probably much more of a player's coach than maybe Nick Nurse was, who's maybe the master tactician, who might not always be the best with he's not necessarily known as a player's coach. So Jordi Fernandez is known as that, and did an amazing job. And who knows what would have happened if Nick Nurse was still there, but full praise to Jordi.
Other teams now, moving away from Canada basketball a little bit here. You were in Jakarta. You watched obviously other games, I'm assuming. So who are some other teams that surprised you the most and maybe disappointed you as well, and some players as well?
Yeah, I mean, France for disappointments was, they won the silver medal. I was talking to the journalists here. They were going for gold, and they were out after 2 games. So pretty disappointing for the French. Rudy Gobert never ceases to disappoint sometimes. He had a terrible tournament, and Evan Fournier played okay, but that was the clear loser of this tournament, in my opinion. Even though they were dealt tough cards, and in retrospect, Latvia came 5th, Canada came 3rd. They had a really, really tough group, but they were still very disappointing. The way they lost to Canada, they were in full control against Latvia. Sorry. And then, found a way to lose that game at the end. And Rudy Gobert was a big part of that. So that's my one kind of team of disappointment. And to go from switching sides, the Latvians, right? They had this amazing, amazing crowd. Felt as though you're in like Riga in Latvia at some of those games in Jakarta, just with all the fan support. Met a lot of Latvian journalists, which was really cool. Made some connections there. Big hockey fans there. They won the bronze medal at the World Hockey Championships this year in Latvia that they held, and it was like a national parade or kind of celebration the day after. So big hockey fans as well. But to go to their team, they had a guy named Žagars, who's just like really short, like maybe 6-foot point guard who does behind the back passes. He had 17 assists against Lithuania, I believe, in the 5th place game. Could shoot. He was really fun to watch. Davis Bertans is just Davis Bertans. If people don't know, he likes to take a lot of threes from deep and does not a lot else. But that was their only NBA player. But they just played super well together, and their coach actually won coach of the tournament, Luca Bonchi, an Italian. So overall, they were just really, really fun to watch. When they played Canada the first quarter, they were up 23-13, and they were just throwing Canada around. They were playing great defense, basically forcing Canada to make perimeter shots in a type of zone. I thought they were super well coached. Played really fun basketball, and they were obviously, it was their first World Cup ever they had been to, and then they made the quarterfinals and came 5th. So good on them, and they were definitely the surprise of the tournament.
The best part is that they did it without Porzingis.
Yeah, which was a point of contention for a lot of Latvians that he didn't show up. But we had Jamal Murray who didn't show up, so it was an even playing field.
Okay, sticking with that theme, the players, right? Like I have a note here. I wrote NBA players are ballers. Now, obviously, we know Rudy Gobert struggled. Evan Fournier was decent. There's a reason why a lot of these players internationally as well make the NBA or on NBA rosters at one point. The players I noted, Bruno Caboclo, someone that you've mentioned, who played well for Brazil, was once upon a time on an NBA roster. Rondé Hollis Jefferson, right? It was like getting Kobe comparisons a lot too. So for those people, and I this is more of a funny take, but like I want you to just get your opinion on too. I'm sure you've met your fair share of people that say, "Oh, this player's a bum. Why he's just sitting on the bench, 12th player on the NBA bench. I'm sure I could do better." Blah blah blah. Like how people like to exaggerate. This shows that like NBA players are ballers, because I've just mentioned 2 names that were in the NBA that may deserve to go back in the NBA now. Saying guys like Dennis Schroeder, Mo Wagner, like they for their country, they go crazy. There's a reason why they're in the NBA, right?
Yeah, Willie Hernan Gomez as well.
No, for sure. I would just say like the thing that's really funny is just that you think about Rondé Hollis Jefferson, and he couldn't score in the NBA, and what's he doing, putting up 40 pieces and 35 pieces for Jordan, and it was just phenomenal to see. And then the rest is history. But yeah, I also would say that at the same time you realize that how good players are that aren't in the NBA, right? Like I think about Milutinov and all these other guys for Serbia, for Germany. There's that Obst guy who just made every 3 for Germany. So the talent around the world, I think, is at a level it's never been at. And I think that's kind of what I learned from this tournament, is that the rest of the world is catching up to the USA. At the same time, if you're the 15th man on an NBA roster, guess what? You're pretty damn good at basketball. That doesn't mean you're a scrub, even if you're a Kwame Brown or someone like that. Or I'm trying to think of or Ben Simmons now, or whoever, or Anthony Bennett, etc. So yeah, if you're in the NBA, you're pretty damn good. That doesn't mean that because you're in the NBA that you're gonna be better than someone abroad. And at the end of the day, basketball is a team game, right? And you could see like the two teams in the finals only had maybe, I mean, Germany had I think 5 or 6 NBA guys, and Serbia had 2 or 3, and they were in the finals. And guess what? Canada had 7, Australia had like 9, USA obviously had 12, and they weren't the finalists. So just because you have NBA players doesn't mean that you're the best team, because basketball is a team game, and there's a lot of talent all around, and you have to win as a team, it's not who can, win the most in one-on-one against another from each country, and that's the winner. It's no, you have to win as a team out there on the court. So that's maybe my biggest takeaway.
All right, so last question here. Did we piss off the USA so that like in the Olympics they're gonna get like LeBron, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, all these guys back in just to like show them who they really are?
yeah. I don't know if we pissed them off. It's always fun to beat the USA because they're always arrogant, or there's definitely that contingent of their fan base that is. It'll be really interesting to see who goes to the Olympics, right? Steph Curry's never been to an Olympics. His career's winding down. I mean, he's still amazing, but we'll see who's there. But I think the era of the USA being the prohibited favorites at these tournaments is gone. You think about who was the top, I guess in top 5 in MVP voting this year, there was one American, because Shea was 5th, right? It was Giannis. I mean, Embiid maybe is American now, I don't know, but really isn't an American like through and through. Giannis, Jokic, Shea, right? And I think the 4th in MVP voting was, I believe, Tatum. There's also Luka too. So a lot of the best players in the world are not American now, right? Unlike maybe 20 years ago, and certainly in 1992 when you think about the dream team. So the basketball world's closing, and it's going to be fun to see the USA when I think, I'd take the field over the USA at the Olympics. If I had to bet who's going to win the gold medal, I don't think it's USA or the presumptive favorites. I think they should be the favorites, but should they be over the field? I wouldn't think so. As I said, they only beat France at the last Olympics by 5 points because Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant. It's definitely different. And if they just keep throwing teams together with no continuity, I actually maybe like Canada's chances a bit more if they add a Wiggins and a Jamal Murray and maybe an Andrew Nemhard or something. So it would be really sweet to beat them at an Olympics and kick them out. I really hope we can do that as well, not just take away a medal from them like we did today, but it's pretty sweet to kick their butt. And I'm excited to listen to Bill Simmons in like 12 hours lament the Team USA and how they lost to us because Josh Hart was out there on the court in crunch time, right? It's pretty cool that Canada beat them, and hopefully first of many.
All right, Alex. Obviously we got to let you go here. We appreciate you a lot for hopping on.
Of course.
We would love to do this more. We obviously I'd love to talk the NBA with you. Maybe
anytime,
bring
guys.
you on anytime. Before we let you go, though, quickly promote your. Obviously I mentioned in the beginning. Promote yourself, your podcast, and where can people find you?
I always do this for other people on my show, so I've never had the opportunity to do this. So thank you guys, and great stuff you guys are doing. I love how you have a very similar type of name to my podcast, Behind the Play Beyond. I don't know, the BTR and everything. Mine's BTB. So similar acronyms and everything, but you guys are doing great stuff. Hope you guys keep crushing it. And I guess to shamelessly plug myself, obviously I'm going to be at Raptors Republic throughout the NBA season. I'm still in school, so I don't know if I'm going to be all the time, but you can check out some basketball stuff and specifically Raptor stuff. And then when the women's teams start to qualify for the Olympics in February, you'll probably see me there. I hope to be in Paris the next summer in some capacity. So hopefully you can get my stuff there for just covering the men's team and hopefully the women's team as well. And then my own podcast, Behind the Play. I have cool people in the hockey world. I have Ron McLean coming on. I'll have Steve Dangle. Who else? Dave Pagnotta. Hopefully I'm going to have Brian Windhorst, Ramona Shelburne, some big people in the basketball world. It's hard to get to them, but they have agreed to come on. So I have some cool people coming on. For Canucks fans, I've had Harman Dial, Farhan Lalji, Thomas Strand, some beauties in the Vancouver area. Hopefully they can go on your show as well. So one of my best friends is a huge Canucks fan, so I definitely know the Canucks and I love their ownership. It always makes them really, really good consistently. The way but anyways, long-winded answer to say check me out, Behind the Play podcast, Raptors Republic as well. You can follow me at Alex Adams BTB. And yeah, thanks again, guys, for doing this. Definitely more than happy to do this again. And thanks for listening to me for almost an hour. I hope I made you guys a decent little podcast. So thanks again.
No, appreciate you much. We'll drop his links down below, Alex Adams, and we love to talk hockey. I know you're a big sports guy. We're chatting a little bit before we hit the record button. But once again, Alex, appreciate you. Thank you very much. To everybody else watching at home, we appreciate you, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.